All right, thank you for staying. You're watching Daybreak on Trust TV, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. Now, our next discussion, all thanks to technology, the 510.1 million kilometers Earth's surface, made up of 195 countries, has been shrunk into a global village. The major item of exchange and trade in the cyberspace is data. This great advantage of seamless data usage across the globe is not without enormous challenges, especially when data is hacked and finds its way into wrong hands. Many in Nigeria have bitter experiences, and this necessitated the enactment of the Nigeria Data Protection Act 2023. The law is, among other things, aimed at protecting personal data. The Data Protection Act and its provisions is the focus of our discourse on Daybreak this morning, and we have joining us in the studio Babatunde Bamiboye, Head of Legal Enforcement and Regulation of the National Data Protection Commission, and an ICT expert as well as blockchain expert who joins us via Zoom from Lagos, Olubumi Fabao. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Thank you to the viewers.
Yes. All right. Well, let's begin by asking about how apt this new Data Protection Act is in our times.
Thank you very much once again. It's a step that we need to take at this time. Your introduction actually highlighted some of the reasons why we need Data Protection Act at this time. As you are aware, there are vulnerabilities that we must address, such as, things like identity theft, loss of assets, in the digital space, cyberbullying, stalking, and all that, and then unlawful intrusion into the privacy of the data subjects, citizens. And when we say data subjects, actually we mean natural persons. These are issues that necessitate the enactment of the Nigeria Data Protection Act, and of course it flows from the Constitution itself. Section 37 of the Constitution guarantees the privacy of the citizens, the privacy of their correspondent, their homes, their family. These are guaranteed under the Constitution. And again, you could even go beyond that to the declaration, to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations way back 1948, as well as the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights 1966. So all these points to the need for data protection, and the privacy of the natural persons. And Nigeria finally has taken the step. Nigeria, as a matter of fact, signed the ECOWAS Supplementary Act on Personal Data Protection in 2010, and which enjoined member states of ECOWAS, to have their own data protection authority, and to have, of course, to have a legal framework for data protection. That was way back in almost 13 years now. And finally, we now have an act, a beautiful piece of legislation, I can tell you, we can all be proud of as Nigerians. And the Bureau is, the Commission is here to help implement.
All right. I think we should bring in our guest joining us via Zoom, Mr. Fabao. Good morning, and thank you for joining Daybreak this morning.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure joining.
All right. Mr. Fabao, you are a tech expert on all of that. I would like you to speak to the issue of hacking. Lately, there's been stories about hacking of telephone conversations and all of that. To what extent would this law help in mitigating all of that?
I think, like as we mentioned before, this is very, very brilliant. And I think it's a step in the right direction. We don't expect to get it right all at once, but I think that this journey that started in 2019 by the DG of NITA, I think that has been good progress with this bill. And in terms of hacking, this might not directly mitigate against it, because of course, hacking professionals are like hundreds or thousands of years ahead of us. However, it's going to reduce the possibility or the probability of getting hacked. And I think the most important thing about this bill is the protection of individuals' personal data, which has been something that a lot of people have not had confidence in, especially in this part of the world. So this bill, as a person, I think that this bill gives me more confidence in knowing that my country is interested in securing my data. And I mean, when we continue to speak, I'll give several examples to give every layman out there what this bill is going to help them to do.
Okay. All right, well, let's come back to the studio. What are some of the parameters covered by this Data Protection Act? I'm coming back to you now here in the studio. If you may just run us through some of the basics.
Thank you very much. It's a very comprehensive legislation, I must say. It has 12 parts and dealing with objectives of the act, the establishment of the council, structure of the commission, financial provisions, data subject rights, lawful basis and principles of the data protection, enforcement of the data subject rights, as well as registration of data controllers of major importance, legal proceedings and all that. But bringing it particularly to the ideas of principles and lawful basis of data protection, you can follow a sequence of parameters. For instance, you have, number one, the principles, you have accountability, you have rights, you have audits, you have management of records, which are things that are recommended. You have education. You have the responsibility as a data controller or data processors to take technological and organizational measures. You have ethics, as it were, which are implied in the act. Then, of course, again, you have remediation of data breaches, and finally, of course, we made reference to the issues of data sovereignty. This, if you look at the way I have itemized these provisions or these parameters, they themselves, they form parameters. PAMRATERS. It forms the parameters. So at every point, the data subject or anyone who is reading the act or who is familiar, a practitioner, is under no illusion as to what his responsibilities are under the act. Or a data subject, for instance, if you look at part 6, which deals with the data subject's rights, they are self-explanatory. You have, for instance, the right to be forgotten as a data subject. You have given your record somewhere, you've given your data somewhere, and they are getting in touch with you. You don't want them to come back to you again, or you don't want anything to do with that organization or the data controller, as the case may be. So you have a right to be forgotten. You have a right to move your data from one place to the other, which is the right data portability. You have a right to restrict further processing of your data. For example, as you know, data privacy rights is a fundamental right, and it is not until when the right has been breached that a cause of action arises. A cause of action arises even when there is a threat. So as at that point, you can seek a relief in terms of restricting your data. You have the right to be informed. You have the right to have consent. You have all this. I hope I could go on.
Could you give us instances of data breach as captured by this act? What are some of the instances you can give us of saying, oh, this person's data has been breached and he has a right now to, and then the process of taking, the issue up?
I could shock you with one scenario. A person goes out there to register for, SIM or bank account, and it was wrongly entered, probably as a male, as a female. That singular act prevented him from getting his driver's license, getting his passport, his phone not working, because there is this thing in digital space you call interoperability. How does it, if I'm seeing M, the other end is F, there is no integration. And then, of course, there is the now right to rectification now comes in. For instance, you could go and say, well, of course, you have been called a male, you've been called a female, these things could be changed if it's just a paper. But the implication, because it's like a key, your bio data, your personal data is a key in the digital space. If it's not correct, that is just one letter missing, like your password, just one letter missing or space missing. It's a whole lot of, things. And then that means you may not be able to do so many things in life because we live in a digital world. Therefore, it is important for every organization, taking the data of a data subject that is the citizen, as in this case, to be accurate. So the principle of data accuracy also comes in. The principle of transparency, the principle of the standard of care, duty of care, which of course gives rise again to the standard of care, because I can say that I have a duty of care, but what is the standard that is expected of me under the law? So these are the things that could come into play. Just a simple mistake as to letter in your name or your gender, as it were, can actually put a full stop or a kind of stop for or pause to whatever transaction you want to do in a digital world, and that is bad.
All right, Mr. Fabanwo, if you're still there. When I listen to him, everything he says here is in the interest of the citizen. And now, a part of the business that you can give your consent for the usage of your data, and then you can also withdraw that consent. And when I was looking at that, I was thinking, what if when you gave your consent, it was for some kind of investigative purposes? And let's say you're going to be indicted. Are you going to be able to withdraw that consent so that it doesn't move further?
Okay, I think that's a gray area. However, I think in the case of investigation, I think there's a data protector part of it that would issue for authorities to be able to deny you that right. For you to have committed a crime or you're under investigation, you are almost not covered under the right to be able to withdraw it, because that would stand against investigation, and it's easy to get a court injunction to deny you that right. So I think you cannot be very smart against the law and say that after. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
All right. So, people want to play smart and say, oh yeah, I'm giving my consent first, then I'm under investigation. Afterwards, I decide to withdraw my consent as soon as I see that investigations are progressing. You can't be that smart against the law. And I'm sure that my gentleman here, sir, can definitely put more light into that. Away from that, I would like to mention, maybe we've not gotten there, but what interests me the most is the number of opportunities that this particular bill is going to be creating. I remember that it was mentioned that over 500,000 jobs are going to be created. So I would say that more education and more enlightenment about this bill can drive a lot of people to want to learn about data protection, about everything that has to do with data processing, data analysis. And once again, I would say that I see this in a very good light. It is very, very progressive. It's something that is going to help the economy. The data protection industry has, generated about $4 billion, I think, on an annual basis, if my data is correct. And I'm sure that that is going to add a lot to the economy of Nigeria. And looking at the digital economy proposals that we've had shows that we are moving in the right direction. So definitely I see this in the positive light. However, I feel like I can mention a number of challenges, but I would let you go to the next question so I don't take up all the time.
Okay. All right, Babatunde, I will rephrase the question in another way to say that maybe you can give us an idea who is protected under this data protection. Is it just anyone, just about anyone, including cyber criminals, including terrorists, give us an idea. What are the exceptions? What are the boundaries?
Even a condemned person, actually, somebody who is being led to the gallows, has a number of rights. If the judge has said he has to die by hanging, you don't say, oh, this guy is already condemned, we could just shoot him, we could just poison him, we could just do all that. So invariably, we all have rights in varying degrees, but we must understand that the Data Protection Act gives room, makes provision under, I think, Part 5 about the lawful basis of data protection. And that is where, data processing. That is the question she asked earlier, and he was trying to actually explain. But you see, you could process data because you have the consent of the data subject. You don't actually need the consent of the hush puppies of this world to process data in the pursuit of maybe a legal obligation. ICPC, FCC, they have a legal obligation to process data. There are other protocols that you need to follow to process that data. But obviously, a suspect will not give you consent. So that is, apart from consent, you have you can rely on your legal obligation. You can rely on the vital interest of the data subject. For instance, the data subject is not in even a position to give consent. And the processing of the data subject is vital to a survivor, to a security, or for another third party, as it were. You could process in public interest. War against corruption is in public interest. Humanitarian, this COVID-19 and all that is in public interest. You have then contractual obligation, as it were, that you could process data
without consent.
Without consent. But of course, everything you need to have what you call a community reading of it. The fact that I have given consent to be part of a civilized society, I am bound by the rules. So it is not as if consent is still not there in any ramification or in any thing that you are looking at. If I have submitted to law that if I violate the rights of another person, of course, my rights could be taken away. So in a way, there is that prior consent, but it's not just in the face of the law, as it were. Then finally, there is what you call legitimate interest. For instance, we are in a private organization, your TV station, and then you could have a legitimate interest where you process my data without my consent. But what we have under the law is that if you are exercising this particular legitimate interest because it's open to abuses, it must not be incompatible with other provisions, such that somebody could say, I have a legitimate interest to sell marijuana, which is illegal in Nigeria, but maybe legal in other jurisdictions. Then you begin to do all things that are not lawful for you to do in another jurisdiction. So if you're going to exercise things like legitimate interest or something that leaves the lawful basis of data protection to the discretion of the data processor or the data controller, then of course it must be that the data subject could have consented to it if it was brought to its attention, and it is not incompatible with his fundamental rights.
All right, now in the build-up to the 2023 general elections and even after the elections, we saw a trend now in political circles where you hear, so-so person's conversation on phone with so-so person, he said ABCD and the rest of them. Does that act cover things like tapping into people's phones conversation and the rest?
It depends on who is doing the tapping. Definitely, it covers. But like I said, there is a procedure to everything. If you recall the 9/11 attack on the United States, you know, everyone would have expected that if whatever measures that needs to be taken ought to be taken in the interest of the public. So, but then that is the purpose. It brings us back to the issue of the purpose limitation, which is a principle under the Act itself. Why are you doing it? Who has the right to authorize the act of tapping into the into another person's you know, phone conversation? It is not something that it could be done as a matter of routine. I just feel like tapping, or I have this hunch that
I mean, you have politicians using, you know, these things against each other.
That would be unlawful.
Exactly, and sometimes you wonder how these things come by. Really, do they use, you know, institutions of states? Do they use officials of government, or do they use private IT experts and the rest? You know, things like that, and it gives cause of, you know.
Yeah, we can speak really to that. Most of us, when we go online, we expose ourselves to devices that listen to us. It doesn't even have to be the state at all. For instance, you have things that will enable you, apps that will enable you to identify a caller. Do you know the capabilities of that? And then you take your phone to someone to repair. So many people already have access to your phone. And then do you know the capabilities that they have used in, you know, to actually bug your phone, as it were? So it doesn't need a state. The phone now is not like the days when it's on your phone, you see cables here and there, then you need to actually tap. Now it is about apps. It is about, for instance, things like cookies. We go out there, you want to read the news on any station, as it were, then they give you option, accept cookies and all that. Do you know the capabilities of the cookies? So we have exposed ourselves. And that is why it's important for us to have this education over and over again, that we are the ones that make ourselves vulnerable unnecessarily because of the things we accept in the digital space through our phones.
I mean, but you know, people do that out of
ignorance. That is why we must commend your organization, you know, for having this conversation. And you know, a lot of people may not even be listening to this, so it's not going to be a one-off thing. As much as possible, if you could have a banner, I mean, writing as is going, because it's a pandemic, as it were. So it is important for us to be able to continually, you know, remind our viewers that, look, when you go online, you accept cookies, you may be vulnerable to, you know, unlawful intrusion into your privacy. We are investigating, for instance, banks that have apps, or telecoms that have banks that actually talk about they want to have access to your video, they want to have access to your pictures, they want to have access to your location at all times, they want to have access, in fact, to your sexual lifestyle.
In fact, that brings me to another issue, which is almost like a trend now. You have sometimes some of these loan apps, or, you know, platforms that give out loans to people. And then from time to time, I get message telling me, oh, so person has taken loan from us, please tell the person to pay, things like that. Somebody you don't even know. Some of those people, you've not even heard their names anywhere, and you wonder how your contact got into such a thing. Or they will send you a message saying, oh, if you don't ask this person to do this, they are going to do this, and all that. How do we deal with that, and how does this act ensure that issues like that are really dealt with?
Thank you very much for this question. Looking at the vulnerabilities that we have, the level of you know, knowledge, it still has its infancy. What we are pushing, and we are making progress in that regard, is privacy by design and by default. In other words, the obligation should be on the data processor and the data controller to put in place the measures that will not allow such things to happen. I did a transfer of contacts from my phone, you know, to another device. I was shocked to realize that I have over 3,000 contacts. I don't know, I have not verified. But of course, I can't put in my head whether I have 3,000 persons that I know. have been using my number from over, I think, about 20 years, the same number. What it means is that the numbers have accumulated. Now, if I go to, to take loan, I downloaded the loan app. These guys are only interested in the 15,000, 5,000 naira they want to take. So they are going to sign up, even if it's the devil, because probably they believe that, oh, these guys are not even smart. They no collateral, no nothing. I will sign anything and just get my 5,000 or whatever amount. They target the vulnerable, segments of the society. Now, the capability of that app automatically downloads this thing or your contact, people you have met. You didn't know. They just you meet at events. Okay, let's exchange contacts and all that. And then before you know it, your phone number is out there. Now, you didn't consent to that. Then it is not longer the problem of the guy who gave out, or who gave the consent. It is now the problem of the data controller in this case that does he have the right to actually do that? No, he doesn't under the law. And that is why there is a collaboration between interagency collaboration, FCCPC, the Central Bank, ICPC, EFCC, to have a joint action, committee to enforce. And you could recall recently we had to move away, ask Google to actually yank off these data processors, these apps from their platform. And we are mandating data privacy impact assessment that unless you are able to justify what you're doing, you will not be allowed to use these apps.
All right, yesterday the commissioner, Dr. Vincent Olatunji,
yes,
he said that telcos and banks could be fined as low, I would like to say, 2% of their annual revenue for violating this. Is that enough?
2% of 2 billion naira. I don't think it's a small money. A small amount of money.
For violating somebody.
But indeed, that's
and even the bank. It's
but no. The point is this: you have to take into consideration the society we have, the growth. We trying. Part of the objective of the act, of course, is to make Nigerian businesses more competitive. And then you have situations where you are fining or you are imposing a fine. You have a company that maybe 500 billion naira as the revenue, and some people will be responsible for about 50 billion naira as a fine. That would be that's huge. But it's not just about the fine, mind you. I think probably one of us maybe mentioned the issue of trust. The reputational damage alone is enough. It can even cost more than what you are giving them. So, in terms of revenue, in terms of penalty, that's 2% of their gross revenue in the preceding year, and that is actually the higher maximum amount. The law makes provision, I think, under Part 10 of the law, it makes provision for you to charge as high as the 2%. And under the GDPR as well, that is actually, that's like a standard in terms of charging. And no organization has really been fined up to that. Even I stand to be corrected in any jurisdiction, because it's really a high one.
Okay, let's go to Olubumi joining us, who is virtual there. From where you stand right now, and from all you've seen, provisions of the Data Protection Act and Data Protection Act, do we have the mechanism to enforce and to implement some of the provisions in that act? Because sometimes it's not like Nigeria, we are not lacking laws, truly. But in most cases, it's the implementation and enforcement that, we have challenges there. So how far do you see us going in terms of implementation?
You know that I'm always very positive. And so in terms of implementation, I think that we're already on our way. Mr. Babatunde had already mentioned a lot of things within the bill that have been clearly spelled out and have a clear understanding both internally and also to the citizenry. So I'm positive about implementation. However, where I might have a bit of a challenge is in the independence of the commission. So I think that there's so much power that has been given to centralization. And when it comes to data protection, data authenticity, data confidentiality, and now coming to the implementation of that, giving so much power to a particular commission may form a big challenge. So away from everything that I think is fantastic, and I think that we can implement, knowing that we have capable hands, and we would also get capable hands, because I know that we are going to get a lot of data protectors and data processors, up to about 500,000, and is a lot of data protection officers who, of course, would have been trained. So implementation part is great, but in terms of still centralizing this particular thing, just imagine that there is a data leak within the so-called independent commission that may lead to loss of a lot of data, and also lead to loss of confidence on the citizenry's part. So I think that what exactly is it that what would you say is actually independence in the commission? If you look at it, and when it comes to the appointment of the governing council, the executive had so much power, had been given so much power. The minister, I can say too, is getting so much power to be, even has the power to be able to change some laws. So I think that those are the places where those are the gray areas, which I believe may be addressed. But in terms of implementation, I'm quite positive. That's just the only thing I have against it.
All right, Mr. Babatunde, he also mentioned it again. The commission is going to create about 500,000 jobs. I'd like you to take us through some of those jobs that it's going to create, because oftentimes when something new like this comes, we hear it's going to create 100,000 jobs or 500, and then it doesn't happen. So I'd like you to tell us what kind of jobs are going to be created under this.
Thank you very much. It just reminds me of the quotes, maybe I can say from Shakespeare, that there is a tide in the affairs of men that we should take when it serves, and if we don't take it, that it becomes a problem. There is now a tide, and we should be able to recognize it through information. It is not as if the Data Protection Commission, our commission, we open a portal and then begin to employ people. That is, of course, that's not the intention. The government's, the role of the government is to create the enabling environment, and that is what the law has done in this case. I'll tell you for free, there are about 3 million data controllers in Nigeria, data controllers and data processors. At least, let's say a third of them, or even less than a third of them, are viable. That is about 500,000. The law mandates that we should have data protection officers, as it were. That means in this organization, we need a data protection officer. That is a job that has been created. Then who is qualified to be able to take up that job? That is where we come in again. We are setting up a national certification body that will be able, to test the competence of those who hold or intend to hold themselves out as data protection officers. So if each data protection officer under the law obey the law, which will make them to obey the law, actually appoint data protection officers, automatically you're going to have data protection. We are going to have what you call 500,000 people being employed as data protection officers. And what do? Actually, they are the conscience of the organization when it comes to data processing. They are not supposed to be the one to do the processing. They are not the ones who are supposed to be the chief information security officer, as the case may be, because you cannot be a judge in your own case. They are supposed to, oh no, you can't do this. You have not followed the principle of accuracy, storage limitation, fairness, and all that. But if you are the one actually going out there doing the data processing, you won't want to do all those stuff. So they are supposed to act as contact between the commission as well as the organization. Tell them, organize capacity building for the members of staff and even for the licenses and contractors, as it were. And again, we have also, at this point, we have licensed the DPCOs, Data Protection Compliance Organizations, about 153 of them at this point. Of course, 153 cannot actually do all the job for about 500,000 people. And then each of them employ about 5 people in their own organization. So by the time you scale this up, you will realize that it's actually possible.
So direct and indirect jobs.
Direct and indirect jobs, you could surpass that.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak and sharing your perspectives with us. Our guest has been Olubunmi Fabao, who joins us virtually from Lagos. He is an ICT expert and blockchain expert, as well as Babatunde Bamiboye, head legal enforcement and regulation of the National Data Protection Commission. Thank you for joining us on Daybreak and sensitizing us really on all this.
Thank you very much. It has been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, that's our show for today. In case you've missed, you can always catch up across all our social media platforms and also on our YouTube live stream. I am Ayuba Ilya. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Join us same time, same station tomorrow. My name is Stella Iyaji, and do have a very pleasant day.